You're listening to the One Day Advice podcast, where your hosts Nick Riley and Paul Henderson are going to take you for a ride inside the world of personal finance. Together, we're going to give you a fully transparent, behind-the-scenes look into the financial services industry, helping you to optimize your financial life along the way. Today, Paul and I are going to be talking about people in their late stage of their careers, nearing retirement. So, more specifically, we've had other episodes on early career, people in their 20s, 30s, people in their mid career, around the 40s, and this episode is meant to address people approaching or nearing retirement in their 50s, 60s timeline. So, with that being said, we kind of want to talk through what are the main areas, Paul, where questions come up with this age group.
Yeah, this age group, the conversations usually start with, do I have enough? And, that's obviously a loaded question, and there are many factors that go into that, but that's really one of the main things. The second one is, what have I not thought about? At this point, people have some idea around investments usually, but they're looking at retirement, and it's kind of a scary proposition. You're shutting your paycheck off, and you want to make sure you've checked all of the boxes before you take that leap. So those are, I think, the two driving questions that bring people to a financial planner. But then you get into, well, I know Medicare's out there, but what does that even mean? Is it Medicare? Is it Medicaid? Like, what's the difference? And there's a lot to unpack. And then also Social Security. That's another, a source of income and also a source of stress. So those are probably the four main things that people come to us with as or main questions that they come to us with.
Yeah, and on top of that too, just planning around their family as well. So starting to get into and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the episode too, of just planning around passing on or transferring wealth to the next generation. You might start to have some grandchildren or people that you want to help in your family. Because you're at a stage in your life where you have the money to start to put it to good work for the family and all things.
That's a great point. Yeah, some people are if they have excess, they're looking at that saying, well, I'd rather spend it now or invest in my family now when I'm around and alive, and whether that's helping people start a career or buy a house or just family vacations, and they'd prefer that to leaving some type of inheritance. And that's a conversation that people. It's in a way it's kind of fun, in a way it's kind of sad because inheritance.
Yeah,
but those are also super important conversations to have.
Definitely, and that's financial planning in a nutshell. Is just having conversations that sometimes aren't the most fun to have, but are completely necessary. And I feel like people avoid those types of conversations because they are uncomfortable. And I find even more so that people are more comfortable talking about their health with their friends and family or in conversation than they are about their personal finances. It's just a very intimate subject. So, so on to the next. So, when it comes to getting organized at this stage of their life, and looking to plan around replacing their income in retirement, what are some of the things that people should be thinking about at this stage, or what are things that we help clients at this age group?
Yeah, I would say the getting organized is the key point. At this time frame, it seems like their income typically far exceeds their expenses. So oftentimes they just have no idea what they spend. And that's not bad. It's just kind of a fact of the matter. Money comes in, some goes out, and things are good. So we often have a conversation around what does income look like exactly? What how did your bank account change each over the different months? And is there usually there's a surplus? If not, there's another conversation to have. But let's talk about those numbers specifically, and then let's talk about what do you want that to look like in the future. So there's getting organized as a household, and then there's kind of getting on the same page. If it's a couple, as a couple, you end up having those conversations of, well, I had no idea that you spent this much on that, and well, I had no idea that you spent this much on golf, or whatever. Sometimes there's some good conversation that can come out of that. Occasionally, people are fully on the same page already, but there's a surprising amount of conversation around cash flow that's usually helpful to have. After that, then we can get more into like, do I have enough, right? If we know what they're going to want to spend in retirement, and that includes also, do you want to have more travel? Are you going to, lavish gifts upon your grandkids? What does that retirement look like? Now you can start talking about, okay, this is how much you need, and that's kind of like where that conversation starts.
Yeah, and retirement just naturally tends to be a top of mind item for this age group. Whereas early career, mid career, they're focused more on kind of short term money goals, whether that's buying a home and you funding a trip or whatever. People close to retirement, they're really thinking about the fact that, like, what are they going to do when they're no longer relying on income? And I think that the topic around retirement the conversation around retirement has evolved greatly over the last 20, 30 years, because more and more people are not fully retiring, and that's by choice. People are wanting to pursue second careers, or kind of encore careers, you might call it, where they've always been passionate about something, and now they're at a point where they have enough money to perhaps get consistent income from. They've built assets to a point where their money is working for them and providing enough income replacement that allows them to pursue areas that they've always been passionate about, but just didn't know maybe how to make money doing that, or how to navigate that. So we find a lot of people take their skill set and find out how they can leverage their skill set as a consultant or a teacher of some sort, passing on that knowledge to other generations. And with technology these days, it makes it so much easier to start that business at this age.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and it ties in with my favorite phrase of vocational freedom. Just you don't have to work. You're doing this now because either you want to or you're really passionate about a cause. And I'll segue that really briefly into acknowledging that retirement's hard. And if you've gone 30, 40 years working, the idea of stepping away from that it's not easy. And oftentimes people are excited about it and they do it and they're like, wait, this is where I derived my sense of value, or this is where my friends were. And I would say, that's an important thing to kind of prepare yourself for, that, it's not as easy as you might think it is to stop working. And so, yeah, if you have a hobby, maybe engage in that. If I can think of an example of someone who loves to sail and had a captain's license and retired and was like, what do I do with myself? And the answer for them was, go teach lessons. You don't need the money, but it's a little bit on the side. It's not bad. And it can pay for your boat. But that gives you something to do. And it's, I don't want to harp on this too much, but I think a lot of people have been surprised at how it feels to retire. It's not necessarily, for some they're ready to do it, but for others, it's a mental shift.
Yeah, definitely. And in talking with various people that have gone through this stage, it's amazing. Everyone is so different, and having conversations around how to really finding out what you want, whether you simply want to travel, sail, read books, and just spend time at home in retirement. That's totally fine. And then others want to pursue different things. So on the note of kind of replacing income, and there's certain reliance on your own ability to replace that income through the assets that you've accumulated throughout your career, throughout your life. The other aspect that is a big key topic for this age group is planning around Social Security and Medicare. And I think those are benefits offered by the government that, for the most part, you can rely on. There's talks about Social Security not being funded, but for the most part, those are things that you can incorporate into your financial plan around retirement. So, Paul, what are some of the areas that you wanted to highlight around Social Security and Medicare?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point about there. It is a benefit from the government that people are often stressed about. I tend to look at it as if you are close to Social Security, you are probably going to receive Social Security. That's a block that votes, and very few people want to antagonize that group. So if you're close, let's just talk about Social Security, Medicare, as it will be there. The most common thing now, and for years there were different approaches like file and suspend, and kind of strategies that you could take that have been rolled back. It's pretty much straightforward. But the biggest thing is don't necessarily plan on taking it the moment that you're eligible. There's your full retirement age, but then if you wait beyond that, you can get to basically an 8% return for each year that you wait until age 70. So that's the main planning option now. Is if you can figure out the cash flow to get to age 70, that's a 8% return for the length that you're pulling from Social Security. So that's a helpful thing to look at and to kind of to plan around. And then the other one is Medicare, and that topic is huge. And we don't have time to go into all the different ins and outs of Medicare, but I would say first one is don't delay that. You delay Social Security if you can. You don't delay Medicare because you will incur penalties, and that's not good. So you have a 7-month window around age 65, basically 3 months before the month in which you turn 65. Start looking into this. That's kudos to you if you can do that. Don't wait until the last end of your window, because then you will get some delays and penalties. At a high level, I would just say ask questions about Medicare. It's a great benefit. There's a lot there, particularly in the Seattle area. There's some good Medicare Advantage plans, but this is an area to ask questions. If you have, you just ask questions, because you should have some, and there are a lot of ways to, I don't want to say mess it up, but kind of mess it up. Like it's an area that takes some planning.
Yeah. You had me.
Sorry, that's my long-winded.
I hate penalties, so I think anyone in their right mind will hate the sound of penalties. So definitely Medicare. There are things that you need to be proactive on, and it is definitely a great benefit. And make sure you're on top of that so you don't incur any penalties and miss out on some of those great benefits that the government is offering.
Yeah, no, Nick, let me throw a question at you, because this is one that I get a fair amount, and I want to hear your answer and your thoughts on it. So we've covered replacing income. We've talked about Social Security. We've talked about Medicare. What do you do with your mortgage?
What to do with a mortgage? Oh,
this comes up frequently, I find.
Yeah. So when it comes to, people try to complicate. It's funny being a financial planner, crunching the numbers and all that. Happy to do so, but for the most part, paying down a mortgage is largely an emotional decision, and we like to consider the sleep at night factor. We talk to people of all sorts that we always just ask them, how do you feel about having a certain level of debt? How do you feel about having a mortgage balance to pay off and be committed to? Some people are perfectly fine with it, and that's just their level of risk that they're willing to take on. Others, it affects their sleep. They don't like owing a bank with the home that they currently reside in, and they would feel better just having that paid down. So that's where it becomes less of a money crunching decision, because I think we would all agree that if you look historically, you could achieve greater investment returns investing in the overall stock market than, especially in today's low interest environment, where you can get a mortgage for perhaps under 3%, which is just insane. So if you're looking at a purely cash flow standpoint, it makes more sense to keep that mortgage going. But it's hard to put a price or put a amount or dollar amount to the sleep at night factor. So that's why we kind of go into that.
Yeah, it's a question that some people have already paid off their mortgage by the time they're approaching retirement. others are looking at it as why would I pay this down? Like it's basically, I can beat this in the market, and there's that's probably true if you're under 3%, but market returns vary, and so there are some different factors that go into it. But it's been interesting to me how often that question comes up and how much importance. And I think it's partly because it's on your home and you want to make sure that you have a place to live, and so there's just a lot of emotional baggage in a way that's tied to that question. But it's always a fun one to get a sense of kind of how people view their financial life.
Yeah, exactly. And even people that tell us like, oh, we want to pay this down. We don't like having the debt. We will still, in a sense, be the devil's advocate in the sense of like, we will point out the numbers. And if someone really does need more cash on hand to provide a buffer, if something were to happen that could greatly impact their finances, then it makes sense to keep on holding that mortgage as well, because it allows you to have more cash on hand to be able to use towards a buffer for any healthcare costs. So healthcare is a huge topic for this age group, and can be very costly if something comes up that was unanticipated. And I don't think anyone anticipates bad health. Unless you have a family history of it, and you can kind of expect certain illnesses to come into your life. But those are all definitely things to consider when paying down certain debt.
Yeah, and I like the healthcare comment. That's definitely a financial conversation also, but in the realm of other things to consider, in addition to the mortgage and social and government benefits, I would say take a look at your estate plan and have powers of attorney and your healthcare directives in place, and not just in place, but like somewhere that people know where they are. They don't do a lot of good if they're filed away somewhere and no one can pull them out if they're necessary. So those are two areas that I would definitely say are things to consider as you're nearing retirement. There's probably, Nick, would you say some kid related or grandkid?
Yeah.
Related?
So a few more I might add just that come to mind. I mean, so especially in this digital age that we're in and will be in moving forward, like you have digital assets as an individual, as a household. So password management, being able to, like,
that's a good point.
I know I use LastPass, and I have my wife as a beneficiary on that, where she can gain access to all of my passwords for my financial websites or whatever, just to make sure that she has access to funds if anything were to happen to me. And the same thing can go for any age group. I mean, for nearing retirement and having maybe health concerns, it's so important to make sure that your spouse, your significant other, your children have potential access to photos that you keep in your iPhone or whatever. It's like those digital assets you don't want to have go lost. We're not at a stage in life where people are just printing out a bunch of photos and just have photo albums anymore. If you do that kudos to you. I don't. But those digital assets are definitely something to consider, and making sure that if anything happens to you, that your loved ones know where those funds are located at what banks. And just settling someone's estate as a kid for their parents it's emotional already, and you want to make sure that it's as easy on them as possible so they can continue to get on with their life. So that's one topic that definitely is close to my heart. But then also just planning around grandchildren related expenses, starting to you can open a 529 plan for your grandchildren when they're really young, and get that more benefit from that compounding tax free and being used towards future education and gifting. So if you're at a point in your net worth where you're beyond that exemption amount, that differs at the state level, but if you're wanting to start gifting to grandkids, your kids, those gifting strategy or charities, those are all different strategies that we can start to incorporate, as a financial planner, working with these types of people to really allocate your money where you want it to be working for people that you love, for causes that you care about. So those are other things to consider at this age.
Yeah, I'm now thinking about my digital password system, and I think that's a great point. It reminds me of, in the past, there's been the conversation of put your estate plan in a binder and have account statements and everything. And, one of the things I appreciate with, with the portals that basically our clients have access to is everything's listed there. And if you come into that as a related party, you can see where everything is. We, as the financial planners, know where these accounts are. And that's really, it's invaluable as far as you don't have to spend a lot of time trying to track down all these assets or all these accounts when, that's probably the last thing on your mind if it's an estate conversation.
Yeah, definitely.
And it kind of, I guess, on that note, my I can't even think of what to call it. The thing that I like to bring up for people is talking about money with your family. I know it's awkward, and I know that, in general, as like our society doesn't like to talk about money. It's stressful. It feels weird. It feels, I don't know, a lot of different things. But I would say, I've seen some healthy kind of transfers of wealth or healthy kind of end of life conversations when people are more open. And, just kind of from my own experience, when you're looking at this grandparents or parents, it's helpful to know that, okay, they're okay. They have what they need, for, let's say, grandparents, maybe they have a broker they've worked with forever. And we've talked about, brokers don't have fiduciary responsibilities. That doesn't mean that they're all, they're not good, but it's nice to know as a family member that, okay, my elderly family members are taken care of and the person is doing good work by them. And, that's something that you can only know if you've been able to sit down and talk to them and, look at statements and kind of have those conversations. Somewhere in, you don't want to have someone sitting there thinking, oh, my parents are going to leave me millions of dollars so I can just, run wild. Maybe there's a conversation to have there of like, no, we actually expect you to work a little bit and we are going to leave you some, but, there's maybe some strings on that, or maybe there's some incentives to go to college or work for a certain number of years before you get access to this. So there's a lot of, ways that you can structure a really healthy transfer of assets. And then there's ways that you can make it more complicated.
I think just having that open dialogue and chances are you kind of understand how financially savvy your kids might be at this stage too. And, there's a lot of nuances to being able to help your kids at a stage of their life where they could use some of the money if they are financially responsible, but don't have the savings to buy the home that they really need to raise their family in the right neighborhood with the right school system. Being able to provide help for a down payment in a home. Your kids might be nervous to ask for that. It's no fun asking for money, but being proactive as a parent, being able to offer your kids, hey, we want, if there's an opportunity for you, we want to be able to help out. And that's the beauty of being at this stage in your life nearing retirement, where you are able to allocate your financial resources to a good cause to help your family, really get off the right track. So I think these are all topics that we could really unpack in future episodes again. I think that's just going to be an ongoing conversation with Paul and myself.
I think we're going to close every conversation with, well, there's a lot here that we'll continue with.
Yeah, we've got content for days, so days and years. So we look forward to sharing all this too. And I think that's a wrap for this episode. And thanks for listening. And we look forward to continually producing more content for you guys. As always, we're open for any feedback on content ideas that you'd love to hear about. We're doing this for you. We're doing this for our listeners, and we always want to lead with education. So we think education and empowerment is crucial to living a more fulfilling life. because finances intertwine with so many aspects of our life. So hopefully this is valuable to you, and we'll talk soon. Hi, I'm Nick Riley, the founder of One Day Advice. If you like what you've heard, we'd greatly appreciate your help in spreading the word. After all, we are financial educators, not marketers. Thanks for listening, and remember to leave us a review.
Nick Riley is the founder of One Day Advice, an independent registered investment advisor. Paul Henderson is the director of financial planning at One Day Advice. Both Nick and Paul serve as wealth advisors to their clients. All opinions expressed by Nick, Paul, and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of One Day Advice. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment or financial decisions.